Kia ora, Gracecity. How are we doing? I love this name, by the way. I've practiced that greeting a few times as well to make sure I said the right name as well, because that's important. But I love this new name for the church. And I love the story behind it, this idea of grace plus city plus church. And I love these values that we're exploring at the moment, these four values that we're working through together. So last week, as we were online, Jonathan introduced the value of wholeness, that God takes the brokenness of our lives and does something amazing in beginning to transform us by His Spirit. And today we're looking at the second key value of Gracecity, which is Whānau. Whānau. Now, out of the four new values that we're highlighting in this season for Gracecity, Whānau is slightly different to the other three. The other three, we're using English words to describe them. But this one, of course, is Te Reo Māori. And so we're using a Te Reo Māori word to really try and capture this idea of what it means for us to be Gracecity and how we operate together as a church community. And so because it's a Te Reo Māori word, this week I called up a really close friend of mine, Harataki Manahira. Harataki is Māori. He's fluent in Te Reo Māori. He is a leader among his people in the Hawke's Bay. But most importantly, from my point of view, Harataki and Shona they're whānau for Rochelle and I. They're very close friends of ours, and our lives are very much intertwined between our families. And so I called Harataki up this week, and I said, bro, we're exploring this idea of whānau, and I understand that the word whānau, when you translate it into English, it means family. But I also know that when you work with languages and you translate from one language to another language, inevitably something will get lost along the way. It's never a full one-to-one correlation, is it, as we move from one language to another? So I said to Harataki, help me understand this. I know that whānau means family, but is there more to it than that? And he said there's so much more. So we've drawn this small circle around this kind of core definition. But he said, in many ways, that circle is so much bigger than what we've got on the screen. The concept of whānau is so much more broad than simply this core idea of family. And so as we talked, I got a piece of paper and I drew a big circle on the page, and then he began to talk about some of the other parts or components of what this word whānau means. And I began writing them down, and at the end of our conversation, this is what I ended up having on the page. A circle with all of these extra words in them. Whānau means family, but it also has the concept of inclusivity, the sense of coming together and welcoming people in. So this call of welcome. Whānau also has a connotation in the Māori world of generosity, of being willing to help people out within your whānau, those who are lacking or who have material needs. If you've got the capability, then you do that. Whānau also has a sense of honour and esteeming people within the family. It has an idea of loving one another, caring for one another. Even if some of the relationships are a little bit strained in a season, if you're whānau, you love and you care for other people. And then importantly in the Māori world, there's this whole idea of whakapapa, of a genealogy, that when you come into a whānau, you're coming into a story. You're coming into a wider picture of what's going on. And all of these concepts together make up this idea of whānau. And as we finished the conversation, we were on video call together, and I'd drawn this on a piece of paper and written it all down in this circle, and I held it up to my phone and said, is this all right? Does this make sense? Have I captured what you've said? And he was happy with that, so I've got his approval, which is good. But the really exciting bit for me is when we got off the video call, and I then opened up the journal that we're using for this series, We Are Gracecity. And I read the words that the leadership team here had written for this value. And what excited me was how beautifully their words captured so much of what Harataki had said. This is what's written in the journal. As whānau, we are authentic. We are loving. We are generous. We welcome and respect each individual, meeting them where they are as Christ does for each of us. And we're grateful for the way in which He's brought us together as a church family. Like all whānau, we have our ups and downs, but our deep faith in God and our honest commitment to one another holds us together. We're open about our lives. Our traditions make us strong, not stale. They help us deepen our faith, grow together, and keep our focus on Jesus. I think those are outstanding words, and I'm so excited in the way that I think the leadership of Gracecity has really captured the beauty of this concept of whānau and what it means for us who have trusted in Jesus, those who have experienced the wholeness that he brings, to also experience this concept of whānau. And I want to explore that a little bit with you this morning by looking at a beautiful story in the Old Testament book of 2 Samuel. So if you want to turn to it, if you've got a Bible or a phone on your app, whether you're here or at home, you're welcome to do that. 2 Samuel chapter 9 is where we're at. Or you can just watch as I put some of the verses up on the screen for us to follow along. It's a story that centers on King David. King David was the second king of the nation of Israel. And even if you're not familiar with the biblical story at all, you've probably at least heard about David and Goliath, the young shepherd boy who goes into battle with this giant warrior of the Philistines. What many people don't know is that this young shepherd boy, right before the David and Goliath battle, had actually been anointed as the next king of Israel. The first king of Israel was a man named King Saul. He was actually a giant as well, a head and shoulders taller than anyone else. But while he was physically huge, he was spiritually a pygmy. His faith in God was tiny or non-existent. And he continually disobeyed the words that God gave him and the commands that God gave him until Yahweh, the God of Israel, ends up saying to King Saul, "You're no longer going to be king. Well, you're going to finish your reign, but it's not going to be passed on to your lineage, to your descendants, to your son. Instead, I'm going to choose a new king," and he sends the prophet Samuel to anoint this young shepherd boy called David. Well, soon after the David and Goliath story, King Saul works out that this young shepherd boy, who is now starting to take command of his armies, is in fact this newly anointed king. And so Saul tries to take David's life. And by my estimate, for more than a decade of his life, David is on the run as a fugitive, as the king tries to hunt him down to kill him. Eventually, King Saul and most of his sons will die in battle. And after a period of time, David is acknowledged to be the new king by all Israel. And so he becomes the king. He captures the city of Jerusalem, makes it his capital city. And then it comes on the point in the story that we pick up in 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. It goes like this. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Jonathan was Saul's oldest son. He was the crown prince. He was the one who was meant to be the next king of Israel. But through no fault of his own, because he's a tremendous man of faith, he was actually put to the side because of his father's sin and disobedience, and David becomes the next king. But instead of becoming bitter and angry about that, instead of being frustrated and trying to kill David the way that Saul did, instead, Jonathan becomes David's friend. And not only his friend, but his supporter. And he protects David's life from his own father. He sides with David. And in the midst of their friendship, they make what is called a covenant together, a treaty, a sacred agreement together. And here's what it says, 1 Samuel chapter 20. This is Jonathan speaking. He says, "Now show me unfailing kindness, like Yahweh's kindness, as long as I live, so that I may not be killed, and do not ever cut off your kindness from my family, not even when Yahweh's cut off every one of David's enemies from the face of the earth." And so Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, "May Yahweh call David's enemies to account." So the reason that Jonathan's asking this is because in the ancient world, when a new king came to the throne, if his dad wasn't the previous king, if he's a new line, a new dynasty, what that new king would do in the ancient world is round up all of the family of the previous king and slaughter them. Just annihilate the entire family, because that knocks out all of the rivals to the throne. And so what Jonathan is asking David is, would you be different to that? Would you instead show kindness to me and not kill me? And would you not kill my family, even when Yahweh has brought you rest and defeated all of your enemies? So as we come to 2 Samuel chapter 9, what's happened in the context is that after capturing Jerusalem and setting it up as his capital, a number of the enemies of Israel attack the nation, and David defeats all of them. So in the previous chapters to chapter 9, he is slowly being given rest from all of his enemies. And so as this chapter dawns, it's almost as though David remembers the words of Jonathan. It's a trigger to remind him of the promise that he had made, to show kindness to the descendants of Saul and Jonathan. And so he asks this question: is there anyone in the family that I can still show kindness to? So he calls in an old servant by the name of Ziba. And here's what he says to him. The king asked, is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness? And Ziba answered the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet. We're about to meet this young man. His name is Mephibosheth. But what I don't want you to miss is the way that he is described. Virtually every time we will come across him in the story of the Bible, this is what is being emphasized about him. He is lame in both feet. He has a physical disability. And in the ancient world, a physical disability like this was horrendously bad. This is an agrarian society where people farm their own land, but he isn't able to do that. This is a warfare society where people join the army and fight for their God and their nation. He can't do that. In fact, very often those who are lame will end up with others who are blind and maimed as those who end up having to be beggars. It's the only way they can make a living. And so this is what characterizes this young man we're about to meet. There's almost a sense in which the way the story's being told is that this is who he is. This is the core part of his identity. He is lame. Now, he's actually been introduced a few chapters earlier in the narrative, and it says this: Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was, here it is again, lame in both feet. He'd been 5 years old when the news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel, that they'd both been killed in battle. And it goes on, his nurse had picked him up and fled, but as she hurried to leave, he fell and he became disabled. There it is again. And his name was Mephibosheth. And so there were two strikes against this young man. One is he has a physical disability in a culture and a time where that was just really difficult. Secondly, he is from the rejected family, the rejected kingship line. So he has two strikes against him. And that almost comes out even in his name. His name is Mephibosheth, which can be translated a few different ways. There's even an alternate name elsewhere in the Old Testament. But at the essence of his name is the word shame. And that's kind of the identity of Mephibosheth. He is the man of shame. And so David finds out that he's alive. And so where is he, the king asked Ziba. And the servant answered, he is at the house of Makir, the son of Emiliel, in Lo-debar. Now, if you pull out a Bible atlas or jump online and try and find Lo-debar, you'll actually have some trouble. It's a hard place to find. In fact, archaeologists aren't 100% convinced or unified in where they've located it. But the most probable place is way up in the north near the Sea of Galilee and over the other side of the Jordan River from the main part of the land. In other words, it's about as far as you can go in Israel before you leave Israel. And it's a tiny little village, and the name Lo-debar literally meant nowhere, or like nothing town. So this is the way the story's being set up. The man of shame is living in nowhere, in a nothing place. Why? Because he's hiding for his life. Because this is an ancient world where the family of the previous king would get annihilated by the new king. And so this young man, maybe 20 years of age, something like that, he is in hiding. His life is full of shame through no fault of his own. And he's fearful that if the king ever finds out he exists, hiding in nowhere town, that he's going to be in big trouble. And so David continues questioning. So he had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Makir, the son of Emiliel. And when Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, see how it's setting this up? Here's his genealogy, here's his whakapapa, and it's not good. When Mephibosheth came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, Mephibosheth, at your service, he replied, which is the same statement that the servant Ziba had made back in verse 2. Now at this moment, as this crippled man is lying on the floor of the palace, bowing low before the new king, I think he presumes he's about to die. He's been summoned from nowhere town. He's been brought to the palace in Jerusalem. He's bowing down before the man who now wears his grandfather's crown. And I think the axe is hovering, figuratively and literally, on his life. I love the way this moment is captured by Eugene Peterson, man who does the paraphrase, the Message of the Bible. Here's how he describes it, this scene. Mephibosheth was put on a donkey and taken to Jerusalem. Every step brought him nearer to his anticipated doom. The wretched tale of his victimized life would now terminate in a bloody execution. Isn't that last line powerful? The wretched tale of his victimized life would now terminate in a bloody execution. And as he lies on the floor, waiting for the axe to fall, he hears these words. Don't be afraid. I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father, Jonathan. I will restore to you all of the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. This is a stunning turnaround in terms of the way that ancient cultures used to work. This is unprecedented and certainly not what Mephibosheth was thinking was going to happen at all. And as scholars have taken this particular story and unpacked it and pulled it apart to help us understand, what many of them suggest is that this story follows an ancient literary pattern or style called a chiasm. Chi is the Greek letter X, so it's an X story. And what they mean by that is that when you frame out the story, it looks like the shape of an X. Here it is. See the X? And the way a story like this works is that the different parts mirror each other. And so on the outside of the story, the introduction is that David plans to show kindness, and the story concludes with him showing kindness. And then the next lines mirror each other. He questions Ziba, and then he gives Ziba new orders. And then it's mirrored again, where Mephibosheth twice in the story comes and bows low before David. And the whole point of a chiasm is to pull your eye into the middle, to the heart of the story. And the heart of the story is verse 7 that we just read. This beautiful moment where David, in a surprising way, shows extreme kindness to this young man. And David in this moment is going to give him 3 extraordinary gifts. Have a look. The first gift is the gift of life. Don't be afraid. I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. You go back to that covenant that they made in 1 Samuel 20. That's what Jonathan asked for, isn't it? Would you show me kindness by not killing me and not killing my family? So David now turns around. He is fulfilling his promise to Jonathan. He's saying to Mephibosheth, I'm not going to slaughter you. I'm not going to kill you. I'm not going to kill your son, who will come up at the end of the story. Instead, I'm giving you the gift of life. I'm going to be different to other rulers of the ancient world. It's the gift of life. But then David goes far beyond what he'd promised to Jonathan. Because secondly, in addition to the gift of life, he gives him the gift of provision. Look at this. I'll restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul. All of the estates and the lands that Saul had owned had become part of the crown. So when David became the new king, he inherited all of this extra land and estate. And now what he does is he turns round and he gifts all of that to Mephibosheth. This sets him up for life. This makes Mephibosheth a wealthy man. It means he will have an income for the rest of his life. He will never have to work again. He will have servants including Ziba, to work the land and to look after his estate. He's suddenly become a wealthy man. This costs David an extraordinary amount financially. And it's far beyond what he had promised Jonathan. But it's an extravagant gift he wants to make. He gives Mephibosheth the gift of life. And he gives Mephibosheth the gift of provision. But then he gives him a third and even more extraordinary gift. He gives him the gift of belonging. He gives him the gift of Whānau. Because look at what he says at the end. You will always eat at my table. Who ate at the king's table? The king's family. His sons and daughters. And what David offers here is extraordinary. He says to Mephibosheth, you're part of the family. And I want you to move into the palace. And I want you to come to the table. And I want you to feel like you belong. You don't have to hide off someplace nowhere. I want you to come here, and I want you to feel like you are part of my family, and you have a place in our whānau alongside each of my sons and daughters. You are welcome with us. And when you stop and look at this extraordinary story, you see all of these elements, don't you? Of the way that Harataki described what the concept of whānau is really all about. David welcomes him, includes him, is generous, gives him honor, gives him almost a sense of a new genealogy, but it's based on the fact that he is the son of Jonathan. He loves and he cares and he welcomes and he makes him part of the family. And the King David gives new commands to Ziba now to look after the estate on behalf of Mephibosheth. And the story ends this way. So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons, and he had a young son named Micah. And all the members of Ziba's household were servants of Mephibosheth, and he lived in Jerusalem because he always ate at the king's table. And he was lame in both feet. In other words, what the narrator's saying is, in one sense, Mephibosheth's life hasn't changed. He still has a disability. It means he still can't work the land. It means he still can't fight in the army. It means he has been given this place in the family even though he hasn't earned it. And there's actually not a lot he can do to repay this kindness either, but it doesn't matter. Because twice in the conclusion, did you see it? He ate at the king's table. He ate at David's table. He's been welcomed into the whānau. He doesn't deserve it and he can't pay it back. But that doesn't matter. He is welcome regardless. You know, when you and I step back from this story, the story of how David shows incredible kindness to Mephibosheth and welcomes him into the family, you know what we're meant to see? We're meant to see ourselves. We're meant to see the way that we relate to the Son of David, King Jesus, and the way that Jesus has welcomed each of us into his whānau. We may or may not have a physical disability, but every single one of us has a spiritual disability. All of us are broken, as we saw last week, because of our sin and our rebellion against God. And despite that, despite the fact that we can't earn our way into the family of God, despite the fact we don't deserve to be there, that we should be dead because of our rebellion against the King, he's welcomed us in. And for those of us who have put our faith in Jesus, we're now part of his whānau, aren't we? Not only have we been restored from brokenness to wholeness as the Spirit is transforming us, we've also been brought into the whānau, the family of Jesus. I love the way this is described in the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. Both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same whānau. The one who makes us holy in the context of Hebrews is Jesus. Those who are being made holy, it's you and I, if we've trusted in him. And it says we're part of the same family. We're now in Jesus' whānau. And this is quite beautiful because often when we think about being in the family of God, we think about it in terms of God the Father. He's now our Father. Jesus taught us to pray, Abba, Father, Daddy. What this verse is reminding us is that that's very true, but that also means that Jesus is like our big brother. And in light of that, look at the second line. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. Jesus is not ashamed to call you his sister. Jesus is not ashamed to call you his brother. If you've trusted in Jesus, he is like a proud older brother who shows off his younger siblings to other people. That's how he feels about you. And you've been welcomed into the whānau, not because you deserve it, not because you've earned your place, but because this is who Jesus is. See, Jesus welcomes us into his family, his whānau, by grace, doesn't he? And just like Mephibosheth is welcome to the king's table, so are you and I. And it's utterly by grace. In fact, that's all the way through the story. 3 times a key word will be used in the story. Verse 1, verse 3, verse 7. Here it is. Is there anyone still left to whom I can show kindness? Is there no one still alive to whom I can show God's kindness? Mephibosheth, don't be afraid. I will show you kindness. 3 times. And this word that's translated kindness in the NIV, in the original Hebrew text, is the word chesed in Hebrew. I talked about this word a few weeks ago in the God Has a Name series. It is the most common description or attribute of God in the Old Testament. It means God's loyal love, his unfailing love that never lets his people go. And David is now using it about the way he is going to love Mephibosheth. In other words, he's received God's unfailing love, and now he wants to pass that unfailing love on to someone else. Old Testament scholar Andrew Reed writes this: the closest New Testament word to kindness is the word grace. The actions of David are those of a person who's seen or experienced God's grace directly and who decides to demonstrate it concretely towards others. He loves because he's been loved. See, David graces because he's been graced. And that's how it's meant to work, isn't it? Because Jesus has welcomed us into his whānau by grace. What that means is that as his whānau, we're now to extend that grace to other people. For those of us who are part of the whānau of Jesus, it's now our job as his whānau to take that same grace and to pass it on. See, and as we read this beautiful story in 2 Samuel, I want to suggest that we're first and foremost meant to see ourselves in Mephibosheth. We're meant to see ourselves as broken people who have been welcomed into the whānau. But then secondly, can I suggest we're also meant to see ourselves in the person of David. People who have received the kindness, the grace, the unfailing love of God, who now look around for who we can give that grace to and who we can extend it to. So as we finish this morning, what does that look like for you and I this afternoon, tomorrow, this coming week? What does it mean for us to be the whānau of Jesus that extends his grace? Can I suggest 3 different things? 3 things that I actually see in the story here, that the way David operates. The first thing I see David doing in the story is he looks outward. David at this point, he's got peace from all his enemies. His capital city is established. He could just sit back and buy a spa pool and order a pina colada and just chill out, couldn't he? But he doesn't. He now looks around for who he can now bless, who he can now grace on the basis of the grace he has received. He looks outside of himself at the very moment he could be incredibly self-centered. And he looks for whom he can grace. So it raises 3 questions, the first of which is this: to what extent am I looking outwards towards others? To what extent am I looking outward, the way David did towards others? To what extent am I looking outwards to those who aren't part of the whānau of Jesus yet? At school and at uni and at my work, in that play group, in that place I volunteer in that sports club I'm part of. How can I look outward more to those who aren't part of the whānau yet? But equally, how can I look outwards to those who are part of the whānau of Jesus? Where are their needs within this family that maybe I could play a part in? I mean, this can be as practical and as easy as this. As we finish this service here live today, those of us in the auditorium, can we just look up, look out? Who's sitting alone? Who, when we begin to chat, doesn't have anyone to talk to? Who looks like they're new? Because there's a fantastic welcome team here at Gracecity that does a tremendous job. But you know what? Every single one of us are part of the welcome team, aren't we? It's on all of us to make other people feel welcome and part of the whānau. To what extent am I looking outwards towards others? The second thing I notice David doing in this story is he gives generously. He goes above and beyond the promise that he made to Jonathan. He doesn't just give him the gift of life, he gives him the gift of provision. He gives him the estates of his grandfather in an incredibly costly move. He's generous. So it raises this question: to what extent am I generous to others, even when it costs me? And then thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, what I see in the story here of David is that David opens his home. He opens his table. He opens his family to someone else. What a challenge this is in a period of time when I think hospitality is on the downward decline. So we're so busy in life, aren't we? That the culture or the idea of welcoming people into our homes, to our tables, is a dying art. But I see in David the willingness to open our lives and homes and tables to one another, both within the whānau and beyond. And you may be an empty nest couple with a beautiful home and you can invite people into it. But you may be a couple with 3 preschoolers and there are toys everywhere. And you can open your home. And you may be a student that's flatting with 5 other people and they're all pigs and the place feels like a sty. But you can open your home, can't you? And I wonder if the third challenge from the story is, to what extent do I open my home and my table in a warm welcome to others? Because that's exactly what David does in this story. And the challenge of this story is that if we have experienced the wonder of being welcomed into the whānau of Jesus by grace, as his whānau, we now have this responsibility to extend that grace to others. To look outwardly from ourselves to see where the needs are. And to give generously when we can. And to open our homes and our families and our tables to one another. Because Gracecity, that is what whānau looks like. Jesus, thank you that this is how you've treated us. That though none of us have deserved it and can ever earn it because of our brokenness, when we trust in you, you bring us into the whānau. You welcome us to your table as sisters and brothers of whom you are not ashamed, you are proud. And that blows us away, Jesus. Thank you for your love and grace that welcomes us into your whānau. And we ask, Lord Jesus, for those of us who have accepted that invitation, that you would help us to now be your whānau, to take up this challenge of extending your grace to others, of looking away from ourselves to the needs around us, giving generously to those inside and outside the whānau of faith, and to open our homes and our lives and our families and even our tables to one another, so that we honour you, our King. In your name, amen.